And somebody needs to remind me at some place when we get to that appropriate point to start the recording for the regular episode when we hit that point.
Oh, right.
Should we do the whole routine about where to record the episode?
No, but that never hurts, Chris. That never hurts. So you guys should be able to see the at least in the Zoom, you should be able to see what I'm screen sharing, right? Which
Yeah.
is the slide.
Is
Yes.
that kind of the
Yep.
splash screen?
And there's a little button that says you're now sharing to YouTube. So yeah, Don, this is slicker than it was last time. And
It's far easier than it was,
Yeah.
Eric. It's just that it doesn't give you the flexibility of saying, "Hey, I've already set up that live stream. I have a link for it. Can I connect to that?" Nope, it doesn't. There probably is a way to do it.
I've got the Discord open, so I'm going to put a note out in that chat.
Oh yeah.
that.
Yep. Yeah, I'm
try
on.
again.
I'm on my laptop, and I don't have my iPad set up either. So I'm unfortunately I won't be able to monitor that, but I know everybody else will be, so it's okay.
I'm about to jump over on my phone here just to make sure that it is.
Oh yeah, I guess I still do have a phone.
Antiquated
It's Saturday.
piece of technology, right?
It's Saturday.
Yeah, there we go.
And it's been a busy Saturday. It's been hauling kids all over Kansas City. Fun stuff for the kids and nothing, but it's just been nonstop hauling kids.
The bigger question is, did you go outside?
Situation.
What's up?
Like here in Arizona, we have day summer camps where people drop off their kids for a few hours to have them learn skills and activities.
Yeah, no.
It's not popular. It's too hot here once it gets to be July, but in May it's fine.
No, it's not any sort of day camp. It's just we've got a dance recital later today, and so there was dress rehearsal for that. There was a flag football game, and then the two older boys went paintballing with a couple of other buddies, which is pretty cool. So it's all great stuff for the kids, and so we're happy to do it. But it just means a lot of windshield time for parents.
Yeah, you may or may not know it because I may not have mentioned this, Eric, but for about 20 years ago, my brother-in-law and I got really involved in paintball. We would play on Saturdays, woods ball, but then we got involved in scenario games, which were all weekend long types of things, which were a lot of fun. So I have about $3,000 to $4,000 of paintball gear that's sitting in storage that hasn't been used in about 15 years. When we got into it, we got serious about it, but we were on the low end of serious. There was one of the teams that
say that all your camping gear came in really handy when we had a hurricane because it was true. Like we have no power. Oh wait, we have a camp stove from when you used to do scenario games, so we're good.
Yeah, that's true.
When you say scenario game, what do you mean? Because right now all that's going through my head is like Civil War reenactors taking it so seriously that they've decided we're going to use paintballs. We're going to figure
it wasn't quite that. And this is going to be interesting as our listeners just pile into this, but that's fine. This is a perfect example of what we normally do before we record an episode. We catch up and talk about anything and everything. But I have done games, EDB, that were like, this tells you how far back this was. Like one of the scenarios was basically based on the Phantom Menace, was sort of the whole concept of the two sides. We did one that was based on Command and Conquer. In terms of what some of the things were that went on in the games. These were 800-900 player total, so about 400 to 500 on each side of a game, like 150-acre field that was out northwest of Houston that had a combination of woods and things. But the big battle, to your point, EDB, was normally the final battle, which was like on the right before the end of the thing on the last day, was across this big open thing, and we might as well have been lining up just pointing muskets at each other. I mean, it was no different than that at all.
At a bachelor party, a friend of mine actually convinced all of us to do a game he called Civil War, which was everybody line up like however far apart, and just each side would point and shoot. And would take like 10 steps closer and just point and shoot at each other. Yeah.
Yep.
Chris, I had a very different bachelor party, and that's all I'm going to say.
This was not mine. This was the bachelor's idea. to get shot with paintballs.
I actually one of my friends, and I was in this wedding party, had paintball as part of his bachelor party agenda. Now, in Jack's defense, he was an associate pastor at a church, so he had, there were going to be limits, obviously, to his what he would do or not do on his bachelor party. But my favorite part of that was all of us that were part of the grooms, we're actually groomsmen for the wedding. At one point, we played this game called Secret Service. And our job was to get Jack from one side of the field to the other, where there were only like 4 of us that were guarding him, and the rest of the folks that were there were on the terrorist side that were attacking us. And that was
okay.
That's actually some of the most. We did not have to go out when we were hit. If Jack was hit at all, he was done. We didn't have to go out, and so literally the 3 of us that were the quote unquote Secret Service detail. That's probably the most times I've ever been hit at close range playing paintball. Because normally when you get hit at close range, you clear yourself out and you're good. But no, you're still taking it, and you're putting your body between those folks and the quote unquote, the groom, the president. And that was a tough thing after all. Hey, we got folks in the chat.
Oh yeah, what do we got in the chat?
We have Evan, I think is Amazon Evan. So he and his
fiancée
Emma are in the house. So shout out.
Helena's in.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hey Helena.
Earlier.
Yeah, she's chocolate ocelot for those of you playing at home. There's a whole
right?
story there probably that we probably need to get into.
Well, Helen has given us some really, really good material and really good background on some of our UK based episodes. So thank you, Helena, and we're really glad you're here.
Yeah, and Evan's pointing out we're just now noticing there's a little bit of delay.
Yeah.
I know that you guys, Evan, you guys are from somewhere down under, but I don't remember exactly where it is. So if you throw that in the chat, I'd appreciate it. I see Dylan in there. We'll see who else joins us. When we said this, we didn't know if we were going to have 3 or 30. It doesn't matter how many we have. We're going to have fun no matter what we do. So, I know that you guys, because of the time shift when we discussed in the Discord, that you're a little ways away. And I see Emma. Emma, greetings to you. I didn't want to overlook you. Morgan's in the house. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to stop sharing this. Man, I got so much going on here. I'm going to stop sharing what I was sharing so you can see faces a little bit better. I want to get everybody here. So now you should have a better view of I guess, Alexis, at least on my screen, you are in the Brady Bunch concept. You're in the middle. So and we're missing the 2 bottom wings. So it's good to have you guys joining us here for the live stream today. We're gonna what's the word they use? It's a showbiz term, Eric. It's vamp. We're gonna vamp a little bit.
We're gonna vamp. Oh no, I spent my whole life vamping, Don.
we're gonna vamp a little bit to give everybody a chance to join us, but
that's a lot of what we do on the in the kind of the pre-episode. A lot of times we'll just vamp, and sometimes like you say, it's just because we haven't talked to each other in a few weeks or whatever, and we know somebody else is coming on, and so we'll just vamp is a better a better word to use than the word I usually use for that activity. But I don't know. Are we? So what's the rating on this podcast? Are we? Because I kind of feel like PG is maybe okay here.
Yeah, PG is fine. I think you want to push the PG-13 barrier. I just don't want us to get what is it? The Carlin routine, the 7 dirty word, the 7 words you can't say or something like that.
We're probably good with that. And so I'll just say shoot the breeze, and you guys know what I mean. But
yeah.
There's Mark, who's Armitage Shanks, as we know. Part of it is I know these folks by their Discord names, not their real names, obviously. So it's good to see them checking in, and thanks for making that connection with us.
So Mark, are you Armitage Shanks because of the English plumbing fixtures company, or because of the Green Day song? Because I grew up in the 80s and 90s.
And just so the team knows, there's about a 7-second delay between us talking and them seeing it on the live stream. So if it takes a little bit for somebody to respond, just recognize that's what happens there.
And vamp.
And we vamp. So we always talk a little bit before we go on about what I'm drinking.
Yeah.
Because I usually and this is kind of for the people listening. So it's no secret that I usually will have a glass of bourbon when we're recording, and today's no different. So this is my bourbon. So I'm actually not getting paid for any of my product placements here, but
because you never actually tell us. Well,
I mean, if they want to pay me, I'll cash the checks. Like that's fine. but they're not paying me to do this, and so I'm drinking Four Roses bourbon. So I don't know if anybody's had Four Roses, but is it the best bourbon in the world? No, but it's a very solid bourbon, and it's a very good value.
Yeah.
And so I got this at Total Wine and More in Liberty, Missouri. That's my second product placement. It's going to keep coming.
if you're going to buzz market and market while you're buzzed, I guess is the other thing that would be going on here. So it works both ways.
We're a long way from being buzzed on.
Yeah,
but no,
you're reenacting the Secretary of State in Idiocracy, where he gets paid every time he says "Brought to you by Carl's Jr."
Oh, brought to you by Carl's Jr. Yeah.
Wasn't that the Secretary of Labor?
About Idiocracy.
No, that was actually the Secretary of Labor at one point.
Yeah. No, it was always brought to you by Carl's Jr. Yeah.
No. At one point, wasn't like I thought the first Trump administration Secretary of Labor was the founder of Carl's Jr.
Yes.
He might have been.
Yes, he was.
Anyway, I don't know.
That is a correct statement.
That first 20 minutes of Idiocracy is some of the funniest kind of cinema I've ever seen. Like the movie goes off the rails and it's kind of whatever after that, but the first 20 minutes is so funny.
Look, I'm just eagerly awaiting the day when we actually have a President Dwayne Herbert Mountain Dew Elizondo Camacho.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm doing more for a President Daenerys Stormborn Johnson or something of that sort.
because we all know how that works. What names are popular now? 20 years from now, we will live the names that we were seeing on TV and other things like that. There was a rash of Codys at some point because of that, and the next thing you know, you're into something else. And as we mentioned before, for those of you that are joining on the live stream, we're really glad to have you. This is not uncommon to what happens now. We were actually just talking before we went live. Since the team has expanded and there's now 7 on the team, this is the first time the entire team has been on the podcast at the same time. And also what goes with that's true and not true, because Dylan was not a member of the team, but was a participant in our first live stream. And so I don't know how to count that, Dylan. So you were there, but not there, but there and not there all at the same time. You were Heisenberg's team member at that point.
No, Schrodinger's.
No, the important thing is I fired the first salvo, the Fort Sumter shot of the barbecue debate.
Yeah,
by bringing Memphis in and all the
Texas. We're doing barbecue last, Dylan.
To be fair, barbecue last. You fired the first on-air shot of the barbecue.
Yeah,
that was a long standing.
Yeah, I do have to tell you, Eric. Though, well, they're not my coworkers anymore. We can get into that later. But some of my former coworkers. Yeah, believe me, I wanted to say some words that weren't PG, but that's okay. But they're going to a conference later in Kansas City, and I remembered that Robert had asked for recommendations of restaurants, so I went to our Slack and I was like, "Oh, by the way, I know a guy who lives in Kansas City. Here's some restaurant recommendations."
Do you know where they went?
They haven't gone yet. It's later on this year.
Eric, are you looking for another chance to buzz market here? Is that what you're looking for?
No. Well, I mean, again, I'll cash the checks. So
but I was like, wait, Robert asked for recommendations. Hold on. So
I mean, and the thing is like for my bourbon, they're gonna have to pay me in. Well, I mean, they could pay me in dollars and bourbon. Let's be honest. But for barbecue, like I don't even want their money. Just send me the meat.
I feel like this is kind of a whiskey rebellion thing we could get going. Like, will you accept payments in bushels of corn, or does it have to be distilled, or does it have to be hard currency? Like, we can go there.
I'm going to go around really quick.
This stream is brought to you, the audience, by Dr. Eric Rush's campaign to be named Burgermeister of Kansas City. Please come to Kansas City and voice your vote for Eric.
all of us have our names on the screen, and everybody's going to be seeing that obviously in the live stream. But I wanted to go ahead and just give everybody the chance to wrap around here really quick, and introduce themselves. And then we'll jump into the stuff that's here again. This is what we do when we talk about off podcast. You hear us reference that during a recording a lot. It could have been what came up in this type of conversation. And for those of you that were watching on TVs, that is actually the color of Dylan's face right now, but we're not going to talk about that in any more detail. So
I have made no such undertakings.
yeah. So I feel obligated. I feel obligated to do it for a couple of reasons. But also I'm going to do the opposite here. A Fork in Time exists because Alexis and I are both avid podcast listeners and had been for a long time. We both love history, and so we'd been talking about doing this. And ooh, there's the special treat. That, ladies and gentlemen, when you get a chance to see it, that is my grandson Connor,
the man.
who turns 7 months tomorrow.
Okay,
Thanks,
Alexis,
Connor.
you're right. He is cute. You're not
Yeah.
The
biased.
newest member of the podcast team.
Yep, he will be the third generation for A Fork in Time, and that ties back to what I was just sharing here about Alexis. Alexis and my wife were gone one weekend to a wedding. I guess I was up in the Dallas area, and I'd been thinking about doing this. And while they were gone, I got online and started researching how do you do one of these things? How do you host it? How do you blah, blah, blah. And suddenly before it was all said and done, I was like, hey, there's one place we'll host it. Host it for free for 90 days. So there's no reason to not even start it now. So I went in and started it and then basically informed her on the way back when she got back. That thing we've been talking about doing, I've done it. Hope you're okay with that and join us. Hey, Connor. So I will have to ask him at some point to go off podcast because I'll get totally distracted. I won't want to talk about history. I'll just get solely focused right there for good reason. But so we started there. So Alexis founded the podcast along with me and was an integral part. For those of you that have endured the early days of the podcast, sometimes they were a lot of solo episodes or they were just the two of us. And I've said this time and time again. I want to say it again while I have the whole team here. One of my favorite things about this now almost 5-year journey, it was in May of 2019, is I met some of the people I already knew on the screen. Robert and I went to high school together, so we knew each other. And of course, I knew Alexis. But the rest of these folks I had never met before Fork in Time. And it's a result of that I call them friends, and I call them people that I enjoy talking history about. So that's been the most rewarding thing about A Fork in Time for me. Not the idea what I thought it was, but doing that. Chris has actually surpassed Alexis in terms of percentage of episodes. But
this one.
That's exactly right. So
You know what? I will.
The last
I will.
episode I was on, I was still pregnant.
I will. Alexis, I will allow you, since he is still a minor, to claim him on your podcast credits. So you get 2 credits for this.
It's close enough, and that'll get us there. And so I'm going to wrap around now and let everybody get a chance to say whatever they want to say before we jump into the stuff here, because we actually are going to produce an actual episode here at some point, and our folks that are here are going to vote on what that episode is going to be. So we have a list to go from. But I have to start with Chris. He's in my upper left, but that's not the reason I'm starting. Is Chris? We have more good people in live than we've ever had. So it seems very appropriate to me to suggest that you should say hi to the good people.
Hi, good people in love. And, we'll probably do. Do we want to drop it off for the actual recording episode? Or do we still want to do a hi to the good people?
We will do a hi to the good people there.
You can do it twice, Chris. There's no limit.
Twice. You're going to have to do it twice.
Okay. It doesn't undo it if you do it twice.
Okay.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So, Chris, anything you want to share with our listeners or folks that have joined us today?
No, the one thing I do think, and I feel like we might want to keep track of this. The other thing is, I think I might be leading in recording locations. I have recorded from, as I remember, New York, Maryland, North Carolina multiple times. Yeah.
A car.
I did record from a car.
Once.
I did record from a car.
I think,
definitely did.
I think
yeah.
Chris has got that by a mile.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about this, and I travel a fair bit for work, but I don't think I've ever recorded any place but Kansas City. So I'm going to give Chris that trophy. I think he's got it.
Yeah. Alexis is the only one I've recorded live with because we would do episodes via Zoom. We would do them live. I have a whole like mixing thing and microphone that I don't even set up anymore because there's not a reason to do it. But Chris was also the first guest that became a permanent team member. So that's another unique thing that Chris has there. And then we've expanded that as we moved along. So I'm going to drop directly below Chris on my Zoom display. That's you, Eric. So Eric Rush.
Yeah.
What do you want to say to the good folks?
I mean, I started off as a listener. I started out as a guy looking for content during the pandemic because I needed to get outside, and so I do my walks, or I go on my bike rides, and needed something to listen to. And I was looking for alternate history because it's something I'd been interested in since high school, which was an increasingly long time ago. And there really wasn't much out there except for this fairly new podcast by a father-daughter team that I thought I would give a try. And I listened to it as like, yeah, this is great. I really enjoy this. This is fun. Don and Alexis seem like really nice people, and they are. And so I listened to that, and eventually became a patron a few months later. Because I think I want to say, Don, I started listening probably about July or August of 2020. And then it was probably December 2020. I decided I was going to be a patron, and you reached out to me pretty fast. And we did that episode on the polio vaccine which is February of 2021. It was 3 years and change ago. Like, I can't believe it's been that long. And it was so much fun that, I've been doing it ever since. So
yeah. And
glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Robert, our history is a little bit different, but say good hi to the good say hi to the good folks there. This is the one time we were invading Chris's little copyrighted territory here.
That's fine.
I am, and I won't say it that way. I'll say hello to everybody who's joining us. We are so happy you're here. I've seen people from England, and so my time frame is all wacky, and I'm not sure, but whoever. It is 7 a.m. Sunday morning. So thank you for getting up and joining us for this. So Don and I knew each other in high school, and we reconnected through the magic of social media at some point. And then he asked me to be on this, and totally selfishly admit the whole Malvinas with our alternate sheep suffrage timeline is because Don and I if you did not hear that episode or catch it, Don and I actually represented Argentina for years, and it takes me forever to this day to still say Falklands versus Malvinas. Yeah, because of that.
We were litigants at the local Model United Nations here in Houston for the case before the ICJ, and that year it was the wrongful seizure of the Malvinas back from the English back in the early 1830s or whenever it was. So Robert and I go way back there, and I was glad to have Robert join us as well. It's good to have him here. I'm going to go to Eric Darling Bond next. EDB, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I was looking through my phone because my journey started when I was working at a warehouse job, and I really needed something to kill the time. And much like Eric Rush, I was a big fan of alternate history. And so I was wondering, like, someone had to do an alternate history podcast, right? And a lot of them were just like, of what existed. It was typically like, what if the Nazis had won World War II, or the South had won the Civil War? And it's like, if I want to read a Harry Turtledove book, I'll just buy one and then I'll have read them all. But I found the first episode I listened to on your podcast, which was No Need to Fight, which was an Alexis-led one about what if the right of succession for the Tudors had gone to, I think, Henry's older sister, who had
wait a second. There was a topic that Alexis was in the lead on that related to English history. No. This is not possible.
They can't.
This is not possible.
That's the thing. You still have
I think
the
it was
lead.
the fact that it was mostly about Scottish history. That was the reason why she took the lead on it. But yeah, I then got to submit my idea on the website, which I encourage all of our viewers at home to do, and you too could maybe one day become a contributing guest host.
Yeah. And the last one that fits that category is you're just a modern Renaissance man, Dylan. That's what you are at the end of the day. So was Dylan Holzheimer. Dylan, I think our first episode, the Elvis episode. Is that how we got started with you as a guest? Am I remembering
That
right?
was the first one that we did, although I did suggest a Woodrow Wilson episode that we ended up basically doing when we put Edith in power. So that was the first one I proposed, but the Elvis one was the first one that we did.
Yeah. So Dylan is in Memphis. It's interesting to me that how the barbecue debate, the great barbecue, is because of where people are from more than anything else. We represent all four of the major barbecue styles here on the podcast just by the way that things worked out. So that made it a little extra.
Well, now let me say this. I encourage our Patreons to go out and contribute because we have not done a live episode for Hawaiian or like Korean barbecue, like do a road show kind of thing.
There is
what, to where
those
to South
two.
Korea?
I'll give you
Yeah,
that. The
Korean
Korean
barbecue is
is
totally a
good.
thing. We should.
Done. I'm there.
Cool.
I will point out, if we're going to talk about barbecue, this weekend actually is the World Championship Pork Barbecue Cooking Contest that is held annually in Memphis every year.
Oh,
It is
wow.
going on right this second.
That's for pork barbecue, but
I
but
am
what is
so glad he put pork in front of that.
well? So we're
Because I was
the-
going to say the World Championship Barbecue occurs in Houston, Texas,
no,
late
no,
February
no, no,
to
no, no.
early March.
No, no,
in
no, no.
conjunction with the Houston Livestock
No,
Show
no,
and
no, no, no.
Rodeo.
American
Wait,
Royal.
wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Robert, I
Late
think
February.
American
this
Royal
March.
is the
this somehow
biggest.
related to like Fat Tuesday? Is this like a Mardi Gras thing? Like it shifts
No.
with Easter or
No, this is like the Super Bowl is the World Championship of football when it's one country that really is the world.
Well, no, it's. I mean, what they have down in Texas is like the XFL. So I mean, if it's.
you mean
No,
like how
no,
they
no,
keep
no,
calling
no,
themselves
guys.
America's
The
team and
biggest
talking
one by
about
far
leaving?
is American Royal, and where's American Royal? Kansas City, Missouri.
So he managed. He
American
managed.
Royal.
This is just how deft and good Eric Rush is. He managed to put his Kansas City Chiefs by referencing football in a position where obviously we know that he has quality on the football side that we've been waiting for to come back here in Houston. You did that at the same time you slammed our barbecue, Eric. You did it all in one fell swoop. I mean that's well done. Very well done.
Really, really embarrassing. But
So I'm gonna use our PG tag here, and I'm gonna say that my on Thursday, the nurse that I've worked with in my clinic for many years made a comment, and she said you know, Eric's a really good bullshitter. and this is kind of part and parcel of that. Anyway,
There you go.
But by the way,
so I
I
flexed
would-
the PG tag a little bit, Don. I'm not going to push it any more than that.
That's fair
I
enough.
would love to hear what Australian barbecue is. I would
Oh, I
be
actually would
very
too.
interested
So
in what. Yeah.
I want to know what animals you're cooking in Australia. That's the even. I mean, I want to know the style, of course, but I also I want to know. I want to know what animals it is.
Just as a statement, I am very interested in learning about this. My mother and sister were just talking about they went to an Australian restaurant, not the Outback, an actual Australian restaurant, and we're not brave enough to try the kangaroo. There was something listed as kangaroo, and I'm going to be 100% honest. I have never trusted like you've seen gator on the menu. I don't quite trust it in a lot of places because I feel like they're just passing chicken off.
Yeah, I mean, you can get gator on a stick in a lot of state fairs.
Yeah, in New
I've
York,
had it. It's not
horse
bad.
meat is still legal.
Yeah.
Not that I've had any, I just know that. But
Oh, okay. So lamb, beef, pork, and chicken. I mean, that sounds pretty much straight down the middle.
I think you got all the
Well,
major
we
food
don't-
groups
you know,
covered there.
we
I'm
don't do a lot
interested
of
in lamb. Lamb.
we
is
don't do a
not
lot of
something-
lamb here in the U.S. Now,
I
and the-
would be very interested in smoking lamb.
Yeah.
I agree.
That
I
is-
agree, Robert.
that
I think that
is-
could be really good. Now,
that
it's
would
mostly
be-
beef and pork.
Mhm.
I will say here in Kansas City, we will do a smoked whole chicken. And if you go to Arthur Bryant's, you can get turkey. You can get smoked turkey that's really good.
Yeah. And to Morgan's point, gator is definitely served in South Carolina. In
Oh,
fact,
for sure.
So
it may be the only protein available there as far as all we know, right? At the end of the day. I
do you
didn't
think
go
they have pythons for sale, like as a cookable meat in
Actually-
Florida?
this is one of the other things. Shrimp and grits.
Yes.
Charleston has a very distinctive take on that versus like a New Orleans versus other places. So that is definitely something. That is another. It's a little more strictly like coastal regionally based, but that's another thing that really has some interesting. And I honestly wish we had a listener from Chicago just so I could beat them up on a regular basis over pizza. That's just me.
This is actually interesting. This is actually interesting and actually pivots pretty well into what I was about to do here. Hey, another appearance there, Eric.
This is Anna. She's not a 7-month-old baby. She's
Yeah,
11 years old, but
yeah.
Hi,
but
Anna.
she's still
Hi, Anna.
part of the podcast family.
Yeah.
If you had
and-
said
and
she
she's
was a
gone.
7-month-old baby, I would have believed it. You're from the Midwest. Everybody's huge.
I mean, she's pretty tall even for 11.
It's all that corn.
Chris, to your point about Chicago, I was looking at actually some of the podcast stats today. I'm actually going to share some here. Chicago is the #1 city for downloads for Fork in Time. It actually even beats Houston, which is surprising to me, given that obviously, a lot of the people that Alexis and I know are here, we're here. We download every episode and have all the way back. Chicago actually is one step above Houston. I was going to go in and look at a little bit more detail about what that was, but that actually surprised me. So, Chris, we do have listeners that are not showing up on our Discord yet from there. So know that if you want to offend Chicago, I'm pretty sure people are listening from Chicago because the download statistics bear it out. So, all right. And I'm going to go ahead and share here a couple of things here, guys. We're going to roll on. Literally, we can do this banter a long time, and often we do before podcast recordings, which is why I'll get chastised a little bit. Why did it take you an hour and 45 minutes for that 40-minute episode? Well, because we talked for about 30 minutes before, and then we talked after. So, that's what we do, and I'm not embarrassed by that at all. So what I wanted to share a little bit was a couple of things here really quick. By the way, this is the map. Can you guys see that? You guys have it on your side?
Map.
This is Buzzsprout, who hosts our podcast. This is just some of the I didn't know these statistics were there until we hosted, and suddenly we had some downloads. And so this is actually something I can pull up at any time. This is actually like pulled up 2 hours ago. So this is where we are around the world in terms of distribution. As you might guess, most of the downloads are in North America, but we have a good following in Europe, and we know that from the folks that we interact with on our Discord server. We know that we're covered from lands down under and elsewhere because of this. There's a few folks in Africa. There's a little bit less in South America and Asia, but we do have a global distribution. But this has been pretty consistent, somewhere about a 75-25 split between our, if you will, our North American, our domestic listeners, so to speak, and the folks that are there in Europe. I think some of the fact that a lot of our topical things that people go looking for topics do hit. History of the UK probably helps us draw a little bit more in terms of Google searches and things like that are there. But I just want to share that. It's one of the things I don't do it as often as I used to from the early on, but it's like, I wonder who's listening in, so-and-so when I'd see a city or something like that. That was always fascinating.
So I have to ask, if we have listeners in the Falkland Malvinas, do they count as South America or do they count towards Europe?
Yeah, stir the pot, Chris. Just stir.
Yeah, that's stirring the pot.
Stir
So
the pot.
that's why we only had 378 or 387 downloads. None of them are from Argentina, Chris.
Yeah.
Actually, one of them might be. I do have a friend who lives in Cordoba.
Okay.
Who might be listening to us.
So we're rolling up pretty quickly on 150,000 downloads since the start of the podcast. And you can see sort of the trend here. And I'll talk a little bit more about some other things here. I just want to share some of these numbers just so you have a sense about what's going on, what we occasionally take a look at. I can tell you in the early days of the podcast, I would go and look at these numbers every day because I was just fascinated by the fact that we were doing no marketing and somehow people were aware of this thing and they weren't all in Houston, weren't all people that I knew, which was sort of cool. You may be wondering, what are the most popular episodes of all time? Here's the list of the top 20. This is literally from like 2 hours ago. It's interesting here. This is one that jumped out at me as a complete surprise, Chris. I knew that Protestant Wind was going to be there because it's always been one of the more popular episodes in terms of being more downloads out of sequence in its time. Obviously, you'd expect the older the episode, the more time it has to be downloaded. The first in the groups were going to be there. Indispensable probably will never be caught. It's the very first episode. And it's real telling to me that notice how many people listen to the first episode and never come back for episode number 2. That's all on me because Indispensable is all me at the end of the day. So that tells me a lot. Also, there's 3 parts to Pockets with Posies, which means, you listen to 1 podcast episode about the play, you listen to 2, but don't push it and go to 3. That's the lesson of that. And I joked once at a reception that I was at, talking to somebody that I knew, no one for long about this. This was early in the podcast days, and they mentioned liking this. Said, yeah, one of the best ways to kill a podcast early on is have episodes 11, 12, and 13 be all about a themed series here and the Black Plague being it. So learn from that. But this is what jumped out at me. Now, if you can see my cursor or not, American Adolf jumped out at me as the real outlier here, Chris. You and I did that episode. I remember it was actually us doing an episode that was based upon a listener's suggestion about what if Hitler had been and his family had migrated to the United States. That one is fairly recent. In fact, look at the date on it, 22. That just jumped out at me. I'm curious if it's because of the Hitler reference and how it gets caught on search engines or whatever. I hope it's not for some other nefarious reason, which groups might be listening to that podcast.
Yeah.
It scares me a little bit to think that. But I found that fascinating that the 165th episode by number is the number 10, and it was that particular one. So don't know what to make about that.
Yeah.
But
that is weird.
It is weird. And so the other thing I was just going to point out here, Negated Nuke. Chris, I know that was one of the ones that you were on, a popular one. Barbosa Bard, 42 Revisited. 42 is a recurrent theme here, one for 9/11, one for baseball. But I just want to share these it's just interesting sometimes to see what's out there. And of course, the early episodes are part of what's the most popular among our listeners, which is not surprising. You guys have any comments about that? I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I just thought it was a fun thing to look at while we were at this mark in time.
No,
I know I've listened to 42 minutes multiple times because I will actually pull that up on 9/11 and just re-listen to it. And also a plug for our other podcast as well. I'll also pull up A Room Where It Happened and listen to that as well. I actually referenced the A Room Where It Happened episode that we did on 9/11 last week in a conversation. So
Wow.
That was a good one. All right. So went in the wrong direction. Oh, here we go. So if you are out there, this is your time to scan that QR code, which is probably the easier way to do it, or go to this monstrosity of a link. I can throw that link or in the thing, and I probably will here. But we're going to be using a tool called Slido to do some of our interactive parts here today. And so if you scan that QR code on your phone or on your computer, and again, I'll set up here so I can actually throw it into the link. I just got a lot of windows going here, guys, so bear with me. But the first poll that you'll go to actually was designed to get people accustomed with it. So there's a place for you to put in one word, and it's where you're listening from. So if you want to do that now as a listener, just to get accustomed to this, the reason you want to go ahead and do that now is we will also be using this as our tool to vote on the episode, which we'll be getting up here too shortly. So this is where you'll find where you vote on the episode topics. So if you want to go there now and do that, I'm going to stop sharing because I just need to get to a different window space here to be able to get, well, I got a lot going on here, guys. My apologies. But to get over to what I need to get over to for sharing that link directly in there. So the folks that are on now, I guess I probably need to share it back now that I've taken it down, right? That's the problem with that. But I'm actually going to throw it into share link with participants. Actually going to throw it into somewhere here. Here it is. No. It is a lot of windows going on here, guys. So this is the link there. It's now in the chat. So you should be able to go there. That will take you to like the master screen for that. And you'll be able to see what's going on with it. So I'm now going to pull back, minimize this window, maximize that window, turn myself around, do the hokey pokey is what it sort of feels like, and go back to being able to share the slideshow. So guys inside the team, you guys can see we're back there now, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And so one of the things I'm going to look to do is I'm going to look to see, oop, here they come. I've got Australia, I've got Ireland, I've got Rochester, New
Ooh.
York, I've got California. Oh, Eric Rush, are you the imaginary Wyoming?
No, no.
That was me.
Oh, okay. I
Oh,
knew that had to
See,
be somebody on the team.
instigator,
Instigating.
Of
You
course,
should've
the
worn that
lawyer's going to be the
shirt.
one to start stuff.
Yeah, no doubt
That
about
would make
that.
sense.
California, kinda. So
I
we'll let
should
this
have gone and thrown that shirt on, and I forgot. I
Yeah.
bought the "So You've Been to Wyoming" shirt.
Wells, Kansas City. So, again, one of the other things that's cool, I mentioned the things that we've really enjoyed about the podcast is the fact that we know it's not just people down the street or people that we've known our whole life, but these people that are around the world. That to me is just sort of cool. In much the same way that I'm talking about a lot of these folks that are here on the team I'd never met before. I may never get to where you are. None of us can go to imaginary Wyoming because we all know Wyoming doesn't exist. If we've been to Wyoming, it's only because we think we've been to Wyoming, right, Eric?
exactly. Well, it's the aliens, the Illuminati, it's all of it that
Yeah.
are conspiring to make us think that Wyoming is a real thing.
And if you haven't gone back and listened to that episode, I recommend it. Actually that came up, I guess, on our first live stream because
It was our first live stream. We talked
one of the
about
things there
our favorite conspiracy theory,
yeah,
and mine was that Wyoming doesn't exist.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And subsequent to that, you will now find that is in our our public store in terms of being able to buy that shirt that Alexis made reference to because we are inspired by our series is there. So you can keep doing that. I will keep that out. I'll throw up the thing here at some point. But then the other thing I wanted to do was just make a few announcements today, and just a little bit of housekeeping. We'll take advantage of the fact to do this, and then we'll get into the fun stuff, which is getting ready to record the episode. So first of all, this is on me. It's a mea culpa, not a team culpa. It's mine. We haven't been as consistent over the last 12 to 18 months about releasing episodes as we were originally. One of the things I used to pride myself on is they may not be a great episode. They may have been a quickly done solo episode, but we released on time, was sort of what was there. And that just got harder when life got in the way. We've had a lot going on in the last couple of years going on. You saw part of what Alexis has had going on in addition to getting married and then having a kid and the other stuff that's going on here, various deaths in the family and other things that have happened. So those are not excuses. Those are reasons, and they're valid ones, by the way, because we have a life. But it just one of the things we've talked about as a team here recently is being more renewed to the commitment of being consistent about our release schedule. And one of the things that helps that is we have a team. One of the coolest things for me that I get to do is I get to listen to my own podcast sometimes where I'm not one of the heads talking on it, which is a really cool thing to me. And that couldn't have happened before except for a solo episode with Lex. And so I appreciate that. But also it's important. Go ahead.
I'm going to be honest. I can't listen to my own episodes.
I have a hard
hate
time
listening to myself because I always think, oh, I would have gone this way, or I should have said that, or I pick up on like verbal tics I have that annoy me.
Been there, done that. Been there, done that. I used to, and now I don't. Now I just make sure I mark them, listen to on my, make sure they went out okay. I check both ends of the podcast, mark them, listen to my podcatcher, and we're good to go. It's also important though, because some of our listeners are patrons, and one of the things that you're supposed to get with your patronage is early access. Well, if we don't have it recorded early, you can't listen to it early. So that's the other reason about being more consistent about our release. So accept our apologies. We've gotten better at times, we've gotten worse, but we have some plans in place to make that a little bit better moving forward. The other is the room where it happened. We mentioned it a couple of times here. We started that as sort of a companion podcast, and the idea was about once a month we would do this. It's not going away, by the way. We created it for a reason. The reason was we would spend so much time or get so interested sometimes talking about the what did. Oh yeah, we got to throw in the what if because that's what we do, right? And so we said, wouldn't it be nice if we had a place where we could actually go talk about the what did. I'm a big fan of the Broadway musical Hamilton for lots of reasons there, hence the reason that it comes from that. It's not going away. We create it for a reason, but we're no longer going to keep it as a separate feed. It's going to merge into the A Fork in Time feed, which it probably should have been all along anyway, because we know that we have a lot of overlap between listeners to both shows. So finding it in one place is there, but the exposure that's there. So if you have the room where it happened feed in your podcatcher of choice, it will still be there for a while. It's going to phase out, but just know that moving forward, you'll find those episodes in the A Fork in Time feed, not in the separate feed over time. One of the things we're going to do is probably about once every 6 weeks to 2 months. We haven't settled on time schedule here. We're not going to get locked in yet, but regularly have episodes that are listener feedback shows. And part of that is as we have more and more of our folks, a lot of the folks that are here today are active participants on Discord. We end up having some very interesting conversations about episodes after we release them. And it's like, well, we need to come back and revisit that. And we want to engage there on Discord. But some of those things I think are worthy, not just to be part of what we do on Discord, but are worthy to be brought back out for our normal listeners who don't participate there. So the idea is almost like thinking this viewer mail almost in a way, but it really is just a way to engage some of that feedback and encourage our folks who go there. Some of the folks have already been mentioned. Helena's kept us straight, and other folks have kept us straight on some UK episodes here of late. We're going to do that a little more frequently. Also helps us with the first thing a little bit because that's one episode that sort of prepares itself almost once every 6 weeks to 2 months. So be looking for that as well. And then the last thing are guests. I mentioned that over half the team came as a result of being a guest on the podcast, and they're now part of the team. One of the coolest things I think we did was when Bo Breslin, who wrote the book on living constitutions, he's an actual real person in academia. I mean, he's legit when it comes to history, kind of thing, and political science. Reached out to us and said, hey, he'd love to be on the show. I hope he's still a listener. I know the last time we talked to him, he was in the UK. We started and have made about, 3/5 the way through a series of episodes that sort of formed off of that in the room where it happened. But I like the idea of having those type of guests on, and we've reached out and talked to others as well, and then our listeners as well. If you suggest a topic, and we have a lot of topics in our suggestion queue, and we know we need to whittle that down. Don't be surprised if we reach out and say, hey, do you want to join us? If you do, great. If you don't, great. We'll still do the topic. But it's because of Chris, Eric, the other Eric Durham Bond, even Robert to a degree, because I invited him to join an episode that I knew that he had some interest in. I think the first one we did was with the Star Wars episode, Robert, if I remember correctly.
Star Wars did not release.
Yeah, and that's those were guests that became part of the team, and to me that's one of the coolest things that's out there. So we look to do more of that. If you have suggestions, if you know of somebody who you think will make a great guest, we do get folks that reach out occasionally to the podcast because they want to hawk their book or something like that, and I'm willing to have those folks on. That was not what Bo Breslin was about, by the way. That was not about selling books. He wanted to just talk about these topics. But so we got to see more of that as we move forward. Anybody on the team have any comments about any of those things? I didn't want to run through them while we had a semi-captive audience because I thought they were important to say.
What are we gonna do? A clip show?
Oh, clip show? No. But no, we're streamlining a little bit, trying to get more consistent. And I just put it in the chat that we love the feedback, and we had a listener, and forgive me, I can't recall which listener it was, that pointed out some mistakes we made with our second sheep episode, our sheep/Falklands episode, and they're very reasonable, things that we just didn't know as a bunch of Americans. So we love the feedback. We're not afraid to revisit stuff. We're not afraid to to admit we're wrong. So please point that stuff out.
In fact,
I will commit to try and log back into Discord. I set it up, and then I forgot my password, and then I had a VPN, and I tried logging it in while I was being listed in Colorado, and now that account may be banned because it thought I was trying to hack my own account. So, I will try to do better.
Okay, appreciate that, Eric. A couple other quick things I wanted to run through. If you haven't visited the website, it's not going to win awards, but it is there. It's www.aforkintimepodcast.com. I mentioned it most shows, just it's there. Want to put out a couple of things. The latest updates, always a place to find a note about the latest stream. If you want to join the team, there's a join the team button. It'll take you to a place to do that. So feel free to go there. We also do have a link there to our Discord server. If you're not familiar with what Discord is, it'll walk you through. That'll give you the invitation that you need. And again, we have discussion, episode feedback. And a lot more of our topic suggestions are flowing through there because it's an opportunity to have the topic vetted out before we even go to recording on it, which is sort of cool. There is our store for logo stuff. We don't, thought about selling merchandise. We're an alternate history podcast, but there's some cool stuff there. If you haven't checked it out, at least go check it out. And by the way, if you're joining us here today, you can use the code LiveStream when you check out through Monday night to get a 10% discount on anything that you buy. As our thank you for showing up and spending some of your time today, getting up early if you're in some places or staying up late if you're in others. And then the other thing is our Patreon page, becoming a patron. I know some of the members of the team are patrons. Thank you for being patrons before and still are, so that's appreciated. Alexis and I knew this was not going to be a money-making endeavor when we set off into it. It's never going to be. We're a niche podcast. We get that. And so I don't expect that to be. But if you do like what we do, it does help defer some of the cost. It's not expensive to host a podcast, but it's also not free. And so if you want to join us there, and again, as we were talking about earlier, one of the reasons for our consistency of our release schedule is to make sure that you do get a benefit by being a patron and being able to listen to episodes early. Right now, that's about a week early when we're in a good cadence, but it can even be earlier than that with some of the stuff that we're talking about in terms of building our back inventory. The other advantage of being a patron, again, if you like some of the stuff that you see in the show stores, always a 20% discount for patrons. There's a special code that patrons have that they can go there and buy logo gear. I do get asked sometimes about what's that thing on your tumbler that I drink coffee from, for example, at church. Well, that's the Fork and Time logo. And I like that tumbler a lot. I like it functionality and otherwise. So again, no pressure. We always said the podcast would be free. By the way, in a world where some podcasts are not free these days, that's changed a little bit in the last little bit. We're going to stay that way. But if you want to support us, there's plenty of ways to do that, and we appreciate it. Know that we appreciate it. It does help defer some of the costs. All right, back to this screen, and the reason we're at this screen now is I'm about to launch the other poll, and that poll is going to be our episode poll. So if you go there now. You should have a different thing that pops up. I'm going to use my phone to do it to make sure that it's working. And this is where we're about to launch off into the fun and frivolity here, or at least that's what we're going to call it. And you should have, yep, it's there now. I'm going to go to the next page here in the slideshow. So we had topic suggestions come in via our Discord server. Now, by the way, when you go there, you may not see them in the same order that they're listed here. And the reason you may not see them in that order is it's intentionally supposed to randomize them when you go there to pick your topic. So we have 7 topics that are open that we are actually about to do an episode on right now. By the way, the folks that don't go pick this up on YouTube when it's they're coming in. They're coming in now. I can see them. The team can't. So I'll get them here in a minute where I can share them. We're going to basically do what we do to prep and then deliver an episode. The episode, when it releases next Friday, will just be the episode. Now, the YouTube live stream, you can go back and pick up all of this good fun stuff. The almost coming up on an hour now that we've done before we actually get to the episode here in the live stream. But the actual release on Friday will just be the part that you're about to hear after we do some of the prep work and we go into there. So the votes are coming in now. And I can see the votes coming in. I'm going to vamp here a little bit. And also, I can't see because of what I'm doing. I can't see. Do we have any notes in the chat that maybe I'm not seeing, guys, that you guys can comment on?
Nope, we're talking about Bo Breslin's book in the chat, which is a good topic for chat. And
do we want to maybe do electioneering? People talk about which topic they like.
Yeah, if anybody wants to make their case for their topic in the chat, now is the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I'm with Dr. Eric Rush. I highly recommend Dr. Breslin's book. I really, matter of fact, I think I've read it 3 times now. I went back and read it at least once since we recorded on it.
And because of recent events, and again, I'll just say this: we've talked about this. I think we've done a very good job of not being overtly political on the show. But we've also talked a little bit more in the last few days or in the last couple of months about we're okay with going there. And I have learned things on the podcast that I did not know that helped my understanding of current politics. And I have a degree in political science. So that tells you how helpful it is interacting with folks around. All right. The votes are coming in.
Ooh.
Anybody, you guys can't see this. I'm the only one right now that can see it. I did not want to show it because I didn't want to prejudice the voting in any way. Does anybody on the team want to take a guess at what they think might be leading the pack right now?
Julius Caesar.
Okay.
Yeah, Caesar.
But anybody else have a guess?
Batman.
I'm going with Commodore Perry.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
All right. The suspense is killing me, Don.
Okay, I'm going to give 30 more seconds here, but I'm going to tell you that right now, so unless there's a late surge of voting, think of this as Lyndon Johnson running for some office someplace, and it's not too late to stuff the ballot box. I guess.
Is there a box 13 was going to be my question.
Yeah. is right now it is Nazi agents succeed in blowing up Hoover
Ooh.
Dam at the outset of World War II. So this is in some ways this is a reboot of an episode that I did as a solo episode, but I think it'll be fun because of what's there. The Commodore Perry episode is number 2, and the Julius Caesar is number 3. So unless we have any more votes coming in here, I'm going to go ahead and close it out.
And we could eventually do all of these.
And we probably will, Eric. Some of them are echoes of things we've done before, but some are not. For example, the whole this was a little niche areas of history that I didn't know. Certainly knew the dates 1066 and how it impacted on history there, but I didn't realize that essentially there were almost simultaneous invasions because of the question over the throne. The Vikings were coming the same time as the Normans were coming. It just so happened that it worked out slightly differently. So that was an interesting little thing as I was doing some preparation off podcast. All right,
I have to give a shout out really quickly to a professor I had in college because it was my early modern Europe class because I was a history minor, and we got to pick our topic for a paper, and I of course jumped on 1066. And we had several people doing it. And I had one person after class, he walked up to the professor and, can I throw my name in for 1066? And the professor literally responded, no, we cannot have more people doing a paper on 1066 than there were claimants to the throne. So you were too late.
Oh,
that
we were waiting to use that since they started. They were like, one day I'll get
No.
to say
She's been waiting for 200 episodes to use that.
I'm very proud of my daughter for all kinds of reasons. She is an avid reader, just like I am, has a large collection of books. It would scare you how many books she has that relate to history there. It would scare you. It would make you afraid. Trust me, make you very afraid. I think you even sold some of them back here at Half Price Books there recently, just because you didn't need any more. You had more than you needed. All right, we're about to go into for those of us, hopefully we haven't lost all of our live stream listeners as we've gone down this path, but we're about to go into what we normally do. This is going to be very similar to what we do during episode prep, what you're about to see right now. And then you'll know when we're going into the episode because you'll hear me do the countdown and all the other fun stuff that's there. So the topic is Nazi agents attack Hoover Dam. What do we know there about the real history? What do we know there about the what did? So what do we need to hit on that?
You beat the band here on this one. This is one that I don't actually know about.
I mean,
this is. Sorry, go ahead, Alexis.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is kind of World War II was kind of it wasn't an American war until Pearl Harbor.
Exactly, and this happened early, didn't it? Wasn't this like 1939?
Yeah, according to Wikipedia.
Okay, well, good.
So that's like the biggest thing that I can think of is like this makes it an American war a lot faster.
That's true. That's very true.
Hold on, does it? Because here's one thing I'm wondering about. So in this situation, Hoover Dam blows up.
Right. But that is going to be our fork, by the way. We need to figure out the when and the other details about that. But there's actually the dam is going to go, or else we haven't fulfilled the fork.
So, but my kind of the point of sabotage and the point of like things like this is to not get caught and to not leave fingerprints. So especially given the tenor of what was going on the American West Coast in 39, 40 into 41, does the United States, I mean, I think a lot of us may not know about Black Tom Island in World War I. They blew up part of the New York docks that were being used to ship ammunition to Europe, but they did it in such, hey, listen, ammunition blows up. It's kind of what it's designed to do. And it was not identified as an act of German sabotage. So do the Germans get caught? That's a legit question.
Absolutely they do. I mean,
so they were clumsy at best based on what I am looking at.
Right. And it was new. Like it had only been constructed in the 30s and all of a sudden it blows up.
Right.
Oh, no. By the way, I am not suggesting that the people think this is like an engineering failure.
Okay.
I'm suggesting you've got the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
you've got the Japanese, you've got a lot of people who are expansionists and are not friendly with the United States. So you've got a lot
You're
of other
suggesting that we don't know
possibilities.
who to pin it on.
I think
Well,
that's
as
a
long as we
legitimate
don't pin it on the
discussion.
Soviets, does it matter? Because
Yes.
we came into the war because of the Japanese attack anyway.
Well,
The
remember the whole
Soviets
idea.
were on the Axis side at this moment.
The Soviets were on the Axis side. The other part of it is this: the argument behind why Germany declared war on the United States when it did is they were trying to encourage Japan to attack the Soviet Union.
Yeah, true.
And all of this tripartite pact comes along in 1940. So there isn't a Japanese, German, whatever. It wasn't quite an alliance in the way we understand it, but there was none of this cooperation. So if this goes off in 39 and the Japanese get blamed for it.
Yeah, because one of the things we've talked about, I honestly made the intentional choice not to go back and listen to my own episode here because I didn't want to be influenced by it in case we went down this path. Probably should have because I would have been refreshed by the by what I'd done for the research there. That probably would have been a little bit better. But I know what struck me was the fact that, and Chris and you and I have talked about this, I think, in other episodes, is that Germany declares war on the United States, and then and only then does the United States declare war on Germany after December 7th of 41, after Pearl Harbor, with the argument being made that if it weren't for the German declaration, what would Congress have done, even though obviously the war was going on in Europe, no doubt about that, in 41, and it was going on in 39, in Europe. But we've talked about that before.
When in 39 did it when in 39 was the
September 1st.
September 1st is the invasion of Poland.
Yeah.
So when are we saying when was the dam attack?
Well, apparently
the dam wasn't. We caught them in 39 in Mexico City.
Right.
Okay.
And but we'd caught the conspiracy as it was just being created.
Hatched.
So I think it'd probably be, I don't know. I mean, let's assume 1940. It was
I was
late
fixing to say 1940 based on what I'm reading that it looks like they jump out early.
Okay.
Yeah. According to this, they started taking notice of a German man taking large numbers of photographs of the dam and the site in October of 1939. A month later, in November, the State Department hears from the embassy in Mexico that 2 German agents plan to cripple the dam by blowing up the intake towers and taking out a high voltage line. The plan being they're going to disguise themselves as fishermen, go out to Lake Mead, and then release whatever charges they have from there.
Which also just raises the question for me: why is it always German telegrams or German communications about the United States coming through Mexico? That's a whole other thing, maybe for a different discussion at a different time. But echoes that are there, right?
By the way, for all of these things, there are these echoes to the First World War. Which of these actually got us involved in the First World War? I mentioned the Black Tom incident. That wasn't the declaration of war. The other part I'm thinking about is with the timeline we just laid out, let's say, and this gets real interesting, the best time to bomb would probably be April when the snow melt happens. So Lake at its highest and it releases the most.
It would be,
you have bigger flow.
You'd have a lot. And we could, we haven't had a chance to look up the hydrological aspects of the spring of 1940 if there was anything remarkable about it. But I agree with Chris. I mean, you would think sort of early to mid spring is when all the snow melt is happening. So April, maybe early May. But
so one of our tests.
What else is going on in May 1940?
Well,
nothing. Nothing at all.
Nothing in France, for example.
Nothing in France was happening.
Nothing at all. Just move along.
I don't know what movies were playing.
was this Gone with the Wind?
No, Gone with the Wind was 39.
No, it was 39, but it's probably still in second runs.
Oh, probably so.
So one of the things we often do, again, pulling back the curtain here a little bit for our live stream folks here, we talk about viable forks. We try to find forks that are viable, whenever possible. So obviously it's viable because there was a known plot to do this. This could have happened. Certainly the capabilities exist. So the viability here really is figuring out a timing viability probably more than anything else. Are we agreed that the way we're going to make the fork work here is April of 40? April of 40 as good as anything since we've got October, November of 39 with the detection, assuming that does not happen, which allows the plot to go forward. So are we suggesting then the fork is, again, back to Chris's point, whether this gets claimed by Germans or gets connected back, but we're talking about this happening before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, right? That's going to be what's the
Correct.
distinctions of what's different about this timeline, right? Okay. Anything else anybody have that thinks will guide us? We should also warn our listeners. Go ahead, Eric.
I have this for April 1st. The BBC broadcast appeared to be a speech by Adolf Hitler in which the Führer reminded the audience that Columbus only discovered America with the help of German science and technology. Therefore, Germany had a right to have some part in the achievement which this voyage of discovery was result in. This meant all Americans of Czech and Polish descent were entitled to come under the protection of Germany, and Hitler would enforce that right not only theoretically but practically. Once the German protectorate extended to the United States, the Statue of Liberty would be removed to alleviate traffic congestion, and the White House would be renamed the Brown House. CBS contacted the BBC in something of a panic, trying to learn more about the origin of the broadcast, not realizing it was an April Fool's Day joke.
Oh.
Adolf Hitler had been impersonated by the actor Martin Miller. So what if on April Fool's Day, that's when this goes off, with just so happen a live broadcast being broken in by the BBC, very much like the Zimmerman telegram being influenced by British agents.
By the way, if we
And
go
it
down
just
this
happens
road,
to time up.
the episode title has to be War of the Worlds reference.
I was just saying
It
the
has to
same
be.
thing. How
No,
the echoes there are too strong. Yeah. So just so we're clear on the point of departure. The point of departure will be April of 40, attacked by German agents on the dam. Somebody actually put this in the chat here. Are we talking about full blown destruction, just damage here?
Mhm.
It's a lot more interesting if it's full blown destruction, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
The thing
I
I'm reading
think-
said
Well,
they were mainly focused on the intake towers. So
Yeah, because I understand the purpose of this was not just to flood Arizona and California downstream. The purpose of this was the electric generation represented by the dam.
Yep.
And the
Yeah.
military objective was to limit or have an impact on aircraft manufacturing in
Yes.
the Los Angeles area. So I guess we are in the middle of the Battle of Britain to a great degree. So they're
Not quite.
Not quite.
almost.
So what's the
We're
motive?
getting-
Again, does that April timeline make sense from the standpoint of what was the stated military objective?
It does, because no matter what, you want to cripple, like, that's the best time to do it, period. That's when the dam is at its weakest, when it has the most water behind it. And, even if we're not in the Battle of Britain yet, the United States was selling material to
we
the
were
Allies.
Lend-Leasing by then. We were in Lend-Lease.
I don't think we were Lend-Lease. I think Lend-Lease is a little later. We're cash and carry, at least. We're
We're
definitely
cash and
sending
carry,
aircraft.
and keep in mind, Dunkirk is about, we'll say, 6 weeks from when
Mhm.
this happens.
Okay.
Also, Hitler is about to sign off on the order to invade Denmark and Norway.
Yes.
That happens April 2nd.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so this is the time, and if I remember right, and so if anybody is a fan of World War II era movies, and I am, there's the Darkest Hour, the starring Gary
Such a
Oldman
good one.
as Winston Churchill, which I think is a good movie. They talk about, well, we could haul some planes for you, a mile from Canada, and you could get some horses and just drag them across. So we were willing to help, but only in very, very specific ways at that point.
The other interesting thing to think about is So if we're saying an April attack, who is the British Prime Minister? It is not a half American whose primary concern, like it is not the one person, maybe the one British Prime Minister more responsible than any other of them for building this idea of the special relationship.
Yeah,
It's Neville Chamberlain. So
it's Neville Chamberlain. Yes.
Okay.
And so is he still trying to appease?
well, this is still the phony war. He's not necessarily appeasing, but he's
because as somebody pointed out in the chat, France is not invaded until May. And it doesn't take long because Dunkirk is in latter May. I mean, it does not take long for things to go south there or east, west there, whatever the case might be. So that's our point of departure. Any other thoughts before we actually get into the episode here?
So what do I kind of dug into the do we blame Germany? I think do people kind of accept the United States is gonna the American public, even if Germany doesn't not say they did this, do these reports come out? Does the United States blame Germany for this?
I'm going to go yes for two reasons. But the primary reason is it's more in keeping with the spirit of the suggestion of the topic, which that it does get tied back to Germany because of what's there. So it's just that we find out what we found out in October of 39. We find out after the fact in April, May of 40, whatever the timeline is there and what that means.
To call back to the 42 minutes, these reports get filed. They come out after the fact. They weren't acted upon in a way to stop.
That's a possibility. Well, because these were, these agents that were apprehended in Mexico City. They left big greasy fingerprints all over everything, and so I don't see that as changing. Okay. And maybe it's after the fact, but I think it's going to prove to be fairly easy to bring the blame back to them.
So we don't have to hit the what did here a lot because the what did is nothing, right? In the sense of the day, except that in our real timeline, in the actual timeline, the plot was sort of uncovered before it materialized. And we're going to say that's the one thing, that's also the departure, but that's also, when we're doing the what did is that, it was thwarted before it reached this point. So I'll go ahead and take that if you guys are okay with that. Anybody else have any other thoughts?
Yeah. Eric, I did look up what movies were playing in April.
Okay.
So February of 23rd, meaning it would still be in theaters, Pinocchio was just released.
Okay.
In April, we have Rebecca on April 12th, April 20th, Till We Meet Again, and then my second least favorite Cary Grant movie, My Favorite Wife, in May 17th.
And I'm going to say, just so our live stream listeners know, Dylan has a gig tonight, so he'll probably have to sneak out on us here. And so, Dylan, if you have to leave, we know why you left. It's not because, although pick a time, make an ugly face like somebody said something you didn't like, and look like you're storming out.
I know exactly.
That always makes it play a little bit better.
I'm going to go ahead and give him the reason. What are you guys playing, Willy Wonka's Factory?
Oh, here we go. All right.
No, I mean, I'm going to say something different. And like what? You put coleslaw on the sandwich?
Actually, before I do have to go, before we get started, this is completely irrelevant, but I swear to God, this actually happened this week. So the state legislature for Tennessee just voted on our official state foods. Memphis barbecue is number 2.
Hot chicken?
Roadkill?
No. Slaw.
What?
I swear to God.
Okay.
I don't know why, but they thought slaw was more iconic to Tennessee than barbecue or hot chicken.
You know what I say about that, Dylan? Sandwich? You should never underestimate the slaw lobby. That's what I'm telling you at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're all working for Big Slaw.
Big Slaw.
It was also specifically hot slaw, which is not even a thing that I knew existed. So, what?
Yeah. I know hot slaw. I've had slaw with hot chicken, but I've never had hot slaw.
Wow. And
So
by the way,
anyway,
guys,
that's your trivia for today.
I am looking all up and down the notes that are in the live stream chat. Those are not being unnoticed. Those will get addressed as we get into the episode here. So keep them coming, and we appreciate them. All right, you guys have anything else before I count us in?
I also might have to duck out because I've got a 7-month-old. So
Understand.
I'm gonna try and stay on till at least 6.
All right, good deal. All
All
right.
right.
Here we go, guys. Counting us into the episode here in 3.
Don't forget to hit record.
Thank you.
And record where?
Thank you, Lex.
The important technical things that happen behind the scenes.
All right, now we're recording. All right, we're good to go. Thank you, Lex, for catching that because I could have gone back and extracted it from the YouTube live stream, but that would not have been a fun thing to do. So you just saved me hours of my life. So thank you. All right, counting us into the episode here in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to A Fork in Time, the Alternate History Podcast. Don sitting in the Man, we just didn't bring the station wagon or the minivan version. We brought the whole Winnebago today because we're doing this episode as part of the live stream as we're hopping into the A Fork in Time way back. Let's Change History Machine. I am joined by Alexis, co-founder of the podcast. I'm joined by Chris Capola. I'm joined by both of our Erics. That would be Rush and Darling Bond. I'm joined by Robert Koshu, and I'm joined by Dylan Holzheimer. And by the way, we're joined by lots of other folks that are also participating because they're in our live stream. So if you haven't participated in the live stream, you can go and find the live stream, by the way, on YouTube. But the only thing you're going to get here in the podcast channel is this episode. So if you want to hear what happened before this, and there's some interesting things that happened before this. For example, we just discovered there's a massive effort by Big Slaw to have their influence on U.S. government that I think needs to be investigated. Somebody may need to be impeached before it's all said and done over that. Then if you don't go back and catch the live stream, you will have no idea what we just made reference to. But those that do. All right. So today we said that the live stream episode would be based upon one of the topics that was suggested by the folks in our Discord channel and that we actually voted on. So we had a vote, and the plebiscite, no sheep votes were cast as far as we know in the process here, although we can't swear to that. But as a result of that, the plebiscite means that we're landing back on a topic that I took on, I think, in episode 28 by myself. But now I have compatriots to go with me. And that's this concept of what if Germany had succeeded in a plot that did happen in the real timeline, which was designed to damage, blow up, or otherwise destroy Hoover Dam. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is an alternate timeline where Hoover Dam is destroyed by German action, and we've chosen to set that based upon sort of looking at the timing of what happened in the real world and other things that were going on. We're going to make that April of 1940 is what we're going to have as our point of departure or our fork here. So that's what we'll be going off from there. So as we always do on the podcast, I'm going to let real quick, just for the benefits of our listeners only, not our live stream folks. This already happened. I'm going to go around really quick. Let everybody say hi so you can recognize their voices. Starting with you, Chris. You want to say hi to good people?
Hi, good people.
There you go. Eric Rush.
Glad to be here.
Alexis.
Hello, everybody. Long time no talk.
Yeah, good to have you. Eric DB.
Oh God, I totally choked. But hi, hello.
Robert.
Hello.
And the toasty Dylan. And again, if you're not on the live stream, you have no idea what we're talking about.
Hello, everyone. This might be the last you hear of me for this podcast, but since we're in the Winnebago, I would like to go ahead and claim the casting as Lone Star in our office production of Spaceballs.
Fair enough.
You're not going to be certain presidential candidates' dog strapped to the roof.
No, I'll be Pizza the Hut. How about that?
Fair
Pizza
enough.
the Hut. Okay.
All right. So the historical what did, we often cover the historical what did here. The historical what did was there was a plot by German agents. Information about this plot came out in the late fall, moving into the winter of 1939. Interception of some communiques that went through Mexico City, of all places, went through Mexico. We talked about that off podcast about this interesting connection between German stuff happening in the United States that comes through Mexico. Echoes of past events like the Zimmerman telegram being a good example of that. But that particular plot was thwarted, and so nothing happened to Hoover Dam. So in the real timeline, What's interesting to me is I remember this one back doing the episode that I did. There really was, yeah, there was some enhanced security just because there was always concern about, keeping things secure. But it's not like, to the best of my knowledge, that this made much public knowledge based upon what I remember about the real timeline. And it wasn't like it changed a lot of what went on in terms of what happened. I want to circle back around to that at a later point because I think that's one of the interesting things about the what if is the difference between the primary opponents of the United States in World War II, Germany and Japan, and how things were thought about by the populations. I think that's an interesting concept here for all kinds of reasons. But in our alternate timeline here, where we're going to pick up as our point of departure is that sometime, let's call it April 1st, because it actually echoes a real interesting thing that Eric DB discovered as we were doing some quick research before we started recording here today, that my understanding is the intent was to put a bomb in through the intakes. For those of you that have been to the Hoover Dam, you know that there are the 4 intake areas that come out of Lake Mead that then funnel down through the dam, help produce the power that what's there. But also, you have a very tall dam that's covering a very narrow, that the very nature of the design of the dam is this very narrow restriction through a canyon there that has been blasted out and other things have been happened to. So the water level behind the water level in beyond the dam substantially different in terms of what's happening there. That's what enables the power to be generated. And so if you blow up the innards there and then you blow up the face of the dam, which if I recall correctly is actually being held in place sort of by the pressure of the water from Lake Mead. That was part of the engineering of what was going on here. So we lose the dam, and I'm going to toss it over to the rest of the crew here quickly. The main inputs of that, obviously, there's downstream devastation from the flooding and what goes down from that point on. So you're going to have loss of life. To what degree, I don't know downstream, but you're definitely going to have loss of life downstream. You're going to lose the power generation capabilities from Hoover Dam, which are pretty substantial and are being relied upon heavily by California populace. What else happens as a result of that?
Well, I think it's going to be pretty quick before we discover who is responsible for this. So we've lost, people have died. I think we could argue probably more people have died in the destruction of Hoover Dam and all the flooding that results from that than who died in Pearl Harbor. And that was an impetus of war for us in our timeline. So I think it's very easy for us to use this as a reason for war in this timeline. And the agents who were caught in our timeline, and this was in November of 1939, were not maybe the most professional when they were caught by our embassy in Mexico City. And so it's very easy for me to imagine that similarly, even if they were successful, they would not be able to hide that very easily or for very long. So I think we would very quickly know that these were German agents. And then I think the December 7th, 1941 speech, the day which will live in infamy, is going to be moved up a bit and will be a very different day that lives in infamy.
Well, I'm going to throw something out just because. So if they're caught in Mexico again, and let's kind of leave that in there, that we see this goes through Mexico. Do we ignore Japan completely, which I think we would at this point? Germany's at war, but by the way, there's a small portion of the U.S. Army is just going to roll Mexico at this point, and we're going to take it over because this is 2 times now in 2 instances where Mexico has allowed, we use the word that, a foreign power to assert themselves. And so we are going to, air quotes for the podcast listeners, we are going to assist Mexico with maintaining their internal security, because I could actually see that rolling in. That is one thing I could actually see happening, because I could see the argument being made, hey, you've done this twice now that you've conspired, so there's obviously something going on.
So that actually adds to another interesting kind of tie-in here, which is at this point, as I remember, the president of Mexico is Lázaro Cárdenas,
Mm-hmm.
whose the only person, the only head of state outside the Soviet Union ever awarded I want to say the Stalin Prize for Socialist Labor.
Yep.
At this point, Mexico actually supplied arms to the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War, provided refuge to a lot of them, was not quite like a cube, like the way we view Cuba, but was very left of center. Oh, and by the way, at this point, the Soviet Union is also, hey, let's understand the Soviet Union at this point is aligned with Germany.
They're together.
So there's, normally to a modern listener, that setup just made no sense because wait. We're attacking a Soviet client or, maybe not client state, but Soviet friendly state because of what the Germans did. But there is a very clear line to be drawn right there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I had forgotten the flip. I forgot that the Soviets had flipped because I just always associate, like I have that picture in my head of Stalin, Churchill, Reagan. Is it Reagan?
No.
Yeah.
No.
FDR.
Roosevelt. Thank you.
Roosevelt.
It was an R. I have that picture in my head. So I had forgotten that they had started the war on the other side. So yeah, you're completely right, Chris.
And the other thing that I think we mentioned there, Pearl Harbor, whoever mentioned, advancing that speech up a little bit with a different target, is that I've seen this so many times. A lot of Americans, when they heard on December 7th that Pearl Harbor had been attacked, it's like, where is Pearl Harbor? Because it was, it's in a beautiful place. People that were familiar with Hawaii knew maybe what it was. But if you said, and by the way, Hoover Dam was attacked. There was not anybody in the United States who didn't know what Hoover Dam was. I mean, it was a major, it was recent construction. It was a big thing. It had been a big part of what had gone on during Depression era in terms of, for lots of reasons, it was providing the power and electricity. Somebody had asked in the live stream chat, with Los Angeles, the nature of the river is the river flows directly south. It's basically along the California Arizona border is where the Colorado goes. So there's no flooding in Los Angeles.
No.
But it was a major boon to power generation. Reason Las Vegas is part of what it is in terms of the readily accessible power there, the other things that are there. It's still a major contributor to power generation in that area. Again, that's a long way from me saying Pearl Harbor what? Hoover Dam, everybody knew what Hoover Dam was. I think the psychological impact of that, plus it actually being in the continental U.S. versus being out on an island in the middle Pacific, I think it's easy to underestimate just what a difference of magnitude that is, even though it's the same type of event, a surprise attack on American soil.
The other thing to consider is that Japan has not signed its non-aggression pact with Hitler's Germany. We are about an entire year away from that happening in 1941, preceding the attack on Pearl Harbor. Likewise, Japan was on the outs with Germany because of their non-aggression pact with the Russians, because for as much as we build up that Japan and the US were competing in the Pacific, which we were, to the Japanese, they were much more scared of the Soviets because they were afraid that if the Soviets landed in Japan, they would murder the emperor.
So do we make a deal with Japan? Do we say,
we might make a deal with Japan because this is even before the July, in July of 1940, Roosevelt had called off any exports of steel, scrap metal, oil, all the things that the Japanese needed us to supply.
And this is the other interesting thing.
Oil was the deal.
That was late. I think that the oil was 41, August of 41.
Right.
But what we're looking at here is if this happens April of 1940, maybe this solidifies a Eurasian, a Nazi Soviet pact with the United States getting involved. And now we're actually sending the Japanese all the arms we possibly can, almost like a Lend-Lease situation to Great Britain, as long with the understanding that they're going to use them in Siberia.
And
Yeah.
we'll forget the Panay thing because this
I mean,
the
by the way,
Panay
Panay
a
was
gun-
like 38,
yeah
37,
38
38.
and it was a gunboat in the middle of the river and
It was already forgotten.
yeah. This, however, as Don said, I think the impetus here that really drives it home is the significance of Hoover Dam at that point because, like you said, Don, it had been completed literally 5-6
It's
years
the shiny
before.
new toy
Yeah.
36.
Yeah,
of
it was.
American infrastructure.
It was essentially brand new.
It was the only thing Herbert Hoover had on his name that wasn't actively terrible.
Yeah.
They make a good vacuum. They make a good vacuum.
Yeah.
Did he design that? I don't think so.
I'm not sure. He was a trained engineer.
He was an engineer, and nobody's doubting that he was a pretty smart guy. But
So where we are right now, just to kind of catch up. So the dam is blown up. We've arrested the guys. We trace it to Mexico. The day that will live in infamy speech is now in April of 1940, and it's aimed at Germany and Mexico. We've aligned ourselves with Japan, and we're giving them whatever they can under the auspices that they're going to fight Russia for us.
Yeah. Other
At
than
the
that,
same
it's
time.
exactly like the timeline that you know. Other than
Exactly.
it's exactly like the timeline that
Totally
you know.
different at that point.
Well, and
But-
then the other interesting thing that goes with that, Robert, is the fact that we were in the prep, and then as our listeners were helping us out with, the invasion of France is not until the following month,
Right.
and so the term Chris used it. This is the phony war, right? It hasn't really. There is conflict in Europe, but it hasn't kicked off in the way that it's about to kick off in Europe, and so. My argument here, and this is why I mentioned the distinction here, what happens as a result of Pearl Harbor in the real timeline is that Japanese Americans are interred. Even once the war is full on because of what happens in December of 41 and the declaration by Germany of war on the United States and the counter declaration back, nobody, and this is mentioned even multiple times in the person that recommended the topic here, is that there's a large German population in the United States, the German Bund. In Texas, we have a very, very large German contingent. In Central Texas, so much so that it's there. And yet we never see German Americans interred the exact same way that I'm aware of.
German nationals. If
Yeah.
you had not gotten American citizenship, as I actually had family that were stopped and questioned because they were not American citizens yet. But German nationals and Italian nationals were detained, but those were non-citizens. Those were citizens of those foreign nations. Japanese Americans, people born here or people naturalized were interned. That's the difference. But there were German nationals detained and interned.
And my argument for the difference there is that because of, I think that was colored by a lot of things, by the way. I think there's an element of racism there. There's an element of jingoism that you can't avoid. But the other reason being that the sneaky attack on us at Pearl Harbor fed into that, the what was already there. So now if you have this the sneaky attack on Hoover Dam playing in the other direction, you get talk about the global stage. We've talked about it here, but even just how that plays out inside the country, I think might be a little bit different, right?
Well, by the way, here's something that's going through my mind right now. There's another fairly significant minority group we just threw on the other side in the United States, especially in the Southwest.
Yeah, that's true. And that's and the thing is we think about culture. I mean, here in the Midwest, I would argue we are predominantly not a British diaspora culture. We're primarily a German diaspora culture here in the Midwest. And, and most of us are both, but it's, how do you even do that? Like, how do you, for people who are citizens, how do you even do that? And I'm not excusing anything that was done against Japanese Americans. It was horrible, but I mean, it would be difficult to even, try something like that. But I think, unfortunately for Mexican Americans,
Exactly.
I think that would be very likely that there would be something, there would be some pretty awful stuff that would be.
There is some very ugly history of the Texas Rangers
Mhm.
in South Texas anyway that will under this scenario is very much escalated. I think I'm not sure all German national. Well, I think the German nationals, not U.S. citizens, but if you were a member of the Bund Party, hello, this is your new home. It has nice barbed wire decorations. I think all Bund members are toast at that point because that was I'm going to use the word, that was a open records act. The FBI, this is the other Hoover name, Hoover FBI. They come in and they run roughshod over the Bund records. And if you were a Bund member, you are now interred. And I'm in my head, I'm wondering how Mr. Ford and Mr. Lindbergh come out in this world.
Interesting, because German Americans knew about the Bund. And what you were actually supporting. And so I think back to my great grandfather was immigrated from Germany and settled in Kansas as a farmer, and was very much against Hitler, was very much against the Bund, saw them as impediments to German Americans being full part of society. So people weren't blind to this.
Well, it's also so many of the German Americans in Kansas, in Wisconsin, in Minnesota were the generation of 48. They were liberal nationalist Germans that were basically kicked out by Prussian
Yep.
militarism.
Yep.
So
That's
opposed
exactly
to all of that.
Yeah. And who wanted to, all I really want to do is farm in a democratic republic. And so that, that'll get you to Wisconsin, that'll get you to Kansas.
Yeah. So do you think we see an internment of Mexican Americans, or do you think it is more
At
of
best.
a mass deportation
Unfortunately,
like under Eisenhower in the 50s?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you probably do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was not the first place, and I think all of this is viable and realistic. That was not the first place my mind went. Not making the connection, but the Mexico connection immediately. I was thinking, what is the impact in the bigger picture that we've already talked about here? But it's real. It's real today. It was real then. It's what's there, and it's, what's scary about it is, again, this whole idea of, it was one thing when there was a surprise attack by the military on Pearl Harbor,
on a military installation.
Right. One military attacking another, right?
Right.
Versus, this has the elements of terrorism or that type of thing. That's a very different place to be in. So then, the reason I had the question about what is a question of trust, what else, what's the next target? What happens next? How do we protect ourselves? And remembering that most of all of World War II, for all intents and purposes, was never fought on American soil in any way, shape, form, or fashion of substance. And suddenly this type of conflict, or the fear of this type of conflict, is in your backyard. It's on American soil. That's a psychologically different thing that's going on.
The other thing I just want to throw out there is this: what's going on in Europe right now? You have people shouting for the RAF to bomb the Ruhr dams, to bomb German industry, and the British government specifically makes the decision not to, because those industries are private property and are not considered valid targets.
I think it opens the targets up, but I think, and I think now we've got to start going into more of the other repercussions of the dam being blown up. What was the dam built for? Yeah, flood control, whatever. That was not what the dam was built for.
Electricity.
The dam was built for electricity. So now Los Angeles is power poor, and what's happening out in Los Angeles as we get geared up and get ready for things?
Consolidated Voltaire, Grumman, a lot of your, if picture the United States, picture any plane that flew off a carrier in World War II. It was probably made in Los Angeles, plus some. The
So
one
now
thing
you've got your impact. Now you've got your impact on our war effort.
the other so to play this out, this is a month, 2 months maximum before the fall of France. None of this changes that.
No, not at all.
No, right?
You know, France falls.
Even with that, I don't think. Yes, it affects American aircraft production. I still think Battle of Britain happens the way it did because shipping time, stuff was in the works, and just by the nature of what tended to be the kind of planes that were built in Southern California, these aren't quite the fighters that Great Britain produces its own.
Right, Spitfire.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing changes there.
Okay.
Now I have a question. So, assuming in our timeline we have declared war on Germany, we have occupied Mexico. You know, because we have to assist Mexico in maintaining their internal security. Does Hitler invade Russia still?
So this is the other
Does Barbarossa happen?
This is the other question I'm talking through, which is, the Mexican government at that time was very friendly to the Soviet Union, well, as has been noted in some of the chats, openly anti-fascist. They were the only government that actually, other than the Soviet Union, that straight on openly supported the Republicans in Spain, and they gave more of them refuge than the Soviet Union did. Part of the game that the British are playing in Scandinavia is supporting the Finns to theoretically fight the Russians, because the Soviets had attacked Poland. They were also talking about bombing Baku from bases in the Middle East. Does this escalation with conflict, the United States occupying a Soviet-friendly state, and the United States, let's be honest, when the United States is attacked on its home soil, it kind of has a flailing effect. It kind of declares war on everybody, regardless of who actually did that. So does that solidify the August 39 pact with the United States going after the Soviet Union as well? And because they do that, the Soviet Union officially becoming involved in the full European war against Britain, whatever remains of France, etc.
So have we replaced Japan and the Soviet Union in the respective sides?
There's a chance.
I think so. Yeah.
Well, Japan was on the Allied side in World War I, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they had been engaged in border clashes in Manchuria and in Mongolia with the Soviet Union. And this is a place, if you look at North Africa, when France falls, one of the reasons the British fought in North Africa is because that's one of the only places that British territory actually touched a Axis aligned territory. Now you've got Manchuria / Siberia, where you could have and I don't think anybody would sit here and say that with what's on the line, I don't think anybody would have had a second thought about abandoning China to whatever fate happened.
Yeah. China is now on its own, 100%.
And the Japanese
the flying tigers don't even exist in this timeline.
Right. Do they have anything to fly?
No. I mean, that's the first problem is you don't have any P-40s. That's for sure.
But I think also,
sure.
one of the reasons the Japanese decided to go the way they did is because so much of their army was tied down in China.
Yep.
I think if we being the West, the United States, Great Britain, who, as we talked about, were their allies in World War I, Great Britain had largely supported Japanese development, in the Russo-Japanese War, and had helped train the Navy and all of these things. maybe they intervene politically just to shut down the Sino-Japanese war because we need those Japanese soldiers in Siberia.
This has a lot more ripples than I initially thought that it did. That's the fairest way I'm going to describe it. I thought this was a
Don,
like the world is bigger
Don,
than we thought it was.
We have caused World War III because of sheep.
I understand that. And recently, what did somebody say on the last episode? That escalated quick, kind of thing.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the nature of democracy, Don. You open up a vote, you let the people have their say, and look what happens. Now we're at war with Russia.
Yeah. But the biggest thing that jumped out at me is I think we talk all the time, and I mentioned this, we were talking off podcast, and because we have guests that are watching how the sausage gets made to a degree here, is that we always look for viable forks. That's one of the tests that we try to we've gone down paths that were non-viable forks. But most of the time we look for what's the most viable thing. What actually, not just what if, but what little legitimately what if could have happened, in that sense. And I hadn't thought about, again, the whole Mexican element. That was not an element here at all. And I hadn't thought about the particular ripple of flipping the fact that Japan is not the enemy. Japan becomes the ally, and what that means. And of course, the thing that also just popped into my head is, yes, there would be multiple fronts on this war. There would be a Pacific front, but it's a very different Pacific front than the one that we're familiar with.
No, it's not a Pacific front. It's a Siberian front.
Right.
Siberian front. Yeah.
It's an Eastern Asian front, right, at the end of the day. But, then that means that the war in Europe is also very, very, very different. And the timing on American involvement in the war in Europe is very different. I mean, that's always what strikes me. Again, in my head, I always think there's a great book. It's about the baseball season in 41. I hear 41. It's the very end of 41, December 7th. And so for all intents and purposes, World War II with American involvement, actual involvement is a 1942 and onward event in terms of being actively involved other than the arsenal of democracy involvement. Now we're talking about an involvement 2 years earlier with a different cast of characters, with different balances of power, different things that are going on. The World War II that we know and the World War II that comes from this are incredibly different.
And it takes us much longer to ramp up because we didn't start the draft again until summer 1940 is when it got really kicked off. September 1st, no. September 16th, 1940, first peacetime draft. I'm just sitting here thinking through. So
and
now
we actually did an episode on
we did an episode of that. Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
And so now we are looking at a super small army that was at one point using cars with cardboard tanks on top of them as their armor. So this could actually, in my mind, it almost makes this. We're going to send Japan a ton of arms and a ton of stuff. You guys go fight Siberia. We'll get you out. Of China. Negotiate. Whatever. We're done. You go do that.
But now my question is, what are the Germans doing after they take over France? Do they put a whole bunch of Panthers on the I just have this image of Germany fighting to the last Soviet, which they would love to be able to do. The United States fighting to the last Japanese soldier. The United States isn't producing enough yet. So it's very possible.
Nor do we have any military. We weren't really ready to roll until mid 1942. And that was with an army that had really been drafted and put in place in 1940.
So we're fighting proxy wars, with the exception of maybe in Mexico,
the home front in Mexico.
Yeah,
we keep people home to guard everything critical
while we're building up. Because let's face it, we talked about this as well. The United States Army cannot actually occupy Mexico.
Well, we can't occupy the whole country.
Right.
Do we try to take El Norte?
or do we support a thinking about Mexican politics?
A client state
We
of
are-
some sort, or
We are not very far from the Cristeros Wars.
yeah.
This is still, everybody involved in Mexican politics at this point had been a general in the Mexican Revolution Civil War. So the PRI hasn't really solidified and the regime hasn't solidified. But we you can't. Again, when the United States is attacked on its homeland, it starts declaring war on random countries and gets involved in wars that it can't occupy countries.
Yeah.
So if we play this out, there's probably an hour and a half of discussion we could have about all the ramifications here. So I'm just gonna fast forward ahead a little bit, and I'm gonna say the inevitable words we always say. We're probably gonna come back and revisit this because now I'm interested in revisiting this with a slightly different take on things, and I think it's valuable. This may become listener feedback episode number 1 to a degree because we have plenty of it. Not that we've been ignoring, but that I've seen over in the live stream chat.
I've seen questions about the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
By the way, I do want to kind of pull all this together, Helen. I love where your head is at. This is something else. If it is shown how effective bombing dams is, the TVA and the Columbia River dams, those are two critical things that haven't been talked about.
Absolutely.
The United States did not use. Yeah, the United States did not use.
The Manhattan Project had 3 major sites.
Hanford,
Washington,
Washington, which was the Columbia River dams. Oak Ridge,
Alamogordo,
Tennessee.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
and then Oak
No.
Ridge.
Oak Ridge,
Tennessee.
Yeah, Oak
Yep.
Ridge.
which was the TVA dams. Honestly, Alamogordo was a research facility.
Yeah, Alamogordo just came up with the ideas, but all the
You-
production stuff was
You needed those other two facilities
and you needed
and
the
the
electricity
power
big
provided
time.
by those dams.
Because when you're enhancing uranium, and that requires
A lot
a
of
lot
power.
of things, but it requires a
Tons
lot
of
of power to do.
electricity.
So we're and are we trying to power this project? We're trying to do any of this so close to the front in Los Alamos, or do we
Well-
bring it into Chicago?
Oh no, it happens. I think it happens in Chicago, where you have,
Yeah.
So
but I think
one of
that's
the,
another real thing to discuss, which is, hey, once you realize how valuable Americans' dams are there other attacks on them, even not knowing how important they were to this project? But they were very important to this project. And if you are reading, Dams Monthly in 1938, 1939, the Columbia River Dam, the TVA, and the Hoover are what you're talking about.
but by the way, a damn DAM good magazine if it actually existed. But and again, to me, the interesting thing there is just this. I'm still fixated in my own head. You may even see the expression on my face about what's going on with this close by international but yet domestic situation in terms of how much energy is having to be devoted to this concern about security threats, maintaining whatever form of occupation, influence, whatever word you want to use to describe what you feel necessary to do with Mexico. I guess we still trust the Canadians at this point. That's the good news if you're the United States. But it's very hard to be focused on what you're doing by proxy or by your own forces in Europe or in Asia when you're concerned about what's going on in Amarillo, kind of thing. And I think that's the part that, in my thinking about, in my understanding of World War II, yes, there were home security concerns because you're at war, right? But not every day waking up is my dam safe, is my this safe, is my that safe. I mean, Americans felt pretty secure during World War II with their homeland security, which allowed them then to devote resources and attention to the international aspects of the war. This is a different war. It doesn't have that feel. Why? Because the attack was on American soil, not just an American port, not just an American military base way out in the middle of the Pacific, but it's front and center, right?
On an American civilian target.
Right.
Remember, even the British who eventually get very quickly to just burn every freaking city we can find, they're still not at the point of being okay bombing civilian factories.
No.
So I have another bad thought here because I'm gonna keep stirring this pot. We're at war with Russia.
Yes.
Russia is communist.
Yes.
What happens to American favorite, most popular last summer scientist? If we try to recruit, do we even try to recruit him? Or does basically everybody get their way and Oppie is out of the picture?
I was going to say, I don't know where Barbie lands in this.
Yeah, where does Barbie go?
Yeah.
Where does the Barbenheimer land at this point?
I can't imagine that I mean, we didn't trust him anyway.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yep.
we know we didn't trust him anyway, but I can't imagine that we would tolerate his leftward leanings.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to just say this based on enough of my research and stuff. Without Oppenheimer, there is no bomb. You needed his quirky, genius, weird, whatever it was, to get
Well,
the
it's
bomb.
not just Oppenheimer. How
there
many
were
of
others,
these
yeah.
scientists were either leftist or were European
Yep.
that are very I alluded earlier to, actually, my grandfather was detained because he was technically a German citizen fighting in the United States Army when Germany declared war. How many other German citizens? Einstein was a German at one point.
Yep.
Fermi was an Italian citizen at one point.
Yeah.
Szilard was a Hungarian citizen. How many of these people are not trusted because they're from a foreign country?
All of them.
But by the way,
Yeah.
Evan has named the episode in the live stream chat. So if you're listening to this on the feed, it's probably no Barbenheimer, and that comes courtesy of giving Evan credit coming from the live stream participants that are there. So I'm just going to close this out here to sort of summarize this, because again, I think we could go on and we will revisit this probably through a listener or something else. What is the end result of this revised war? How does this ultimately end? Is there a negotiated settlement where Germany has, Germany has to capitulate because they're the loser in the real timeline World War II? Is there a different role for Germany? Where do the Soviets sit in this? It's a different Japan. It's a different United States, I think, because of what we've talked about here. There's a lot of stuff here, but do we end up with how does this war end? And what do we have after this war? Because my first place I go is we have maybe a Cold War, but it's a different kind of Cold War, right?
It's with Japan. So I think we ally with Japan out of convenience, and I think we end up with probably a unified democratic Germany and a fractured Russia, whatever Russia looks like, and
A
a Cold War with
unified
Japan.
democratic Germany?
Yeah.
Because there's no Soviet Union.
There's no
gone.
partitioning. We don't partition Germany. Germany ends up being Germany looks a lot like Japan in our timeline.
Yeah.
Does Germany
exactly.
lose? Does Germany lose? Are we all in agreement that Germany loses here?
No, I'm not
I'm
willing
not
to say
100%
that.
sure of that.
I think if you marry German engineering with Russian manpower, and who's the manpower on the, let's call them, American Anglo-Japanese side? I mean, we've talked about we're using Japanese soldiers, but they don't have the numbers here.
And there will eventually be American boots on the ground on a lot of them. And so I'm not going to say it's not going to be bloody, Chris, and it's not going to be in 1945.
Mm-hmm. I think what you might have is conceding the Eurasian landmass, and then you get into a Cold War of Germany. You get into the German-Soviet.
Oh, thank you, George Orwell. You've just created 1984.
Yes.
You've created Eurasia, East Asia, and Oceania.
And who are we always at war with? I get confused. I can't remember over.
Nobody
but
can
again,
remember.
but East Asia. I mean, in 1984, East Asia is kind of a Japanese Chinese conglomerate here. I think it's a I think the Eurasian, power base drives Japan out of Asia, and then there's some agreed to peace, and then Hitler gets to go at Stalin the way he always wanted to. And now
So
we
he
have
definitely
the
holds off until
now
the
we
end
have
of
the
this.
United States, Great Britain, Japan sitting by watching them fight each other, building up our strength, knowing that at some point we're going to want to throw our weight behind one of them, but not knowing which one it is quite yet.
And does
Interesting.
so in
Interesting.
that timeline, does Hitler get nukes? Is going to be another question.
That is a really interesting question.
That's something I think we're going to have to think about.
Well,
we're going to have to
eventually,
circle
yes.
back here, Don. at
Yeah.
some
Yeah,
point.
that's awesome.
So the question of does Hitler get nukes is always a timing question,
Yes.
because in a long enough timeline, the answer is absolutely yes. So if we're talking 1952, of course he has nukes.
And does von Braun get to have his fun at the same time?
Probably. So if we're
that's a dangerous world we're looking at.
Because there was a lot of kind of failed attempts for Germany. But if we're 1948 or so or beyond, and you ask me that question, does Germany get nukes? Absolutely.
Wow.
It's ultimately going to depend on how the leadership of it all breaks down, how quickly everyone is to act.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, for the US, we are in the same position as Austria-Hungary at the start of World War I, where we suffer a terrorist attack, and a country who either knew it was about to happen and either just didn't take it seriously or was complicit is basically going to have its sovereignty attacked by us unless they agree to our 12 reasonable demands so we can investigate the matter thoroughly. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is then dealing with the Hitler situation. How is that going to work out between them and the Soviets? I'm very much afraid that the Allies will go with Hitler just to defeat communism. But again, you can read all about that in the Harry Turtledove book, The Great Switch. As for Japan and Asia, it is kind of like Theodore Roosevelt's dream, because when he administered the peace talks, he made the gentleman's agreement of like, hey, all of Asia is going to be Japan's. It's inevitable. Like, they're going to just be one ethno state, which is Pan-Asian, but it's going to be led by the Japanese. The problem with the Japanese is they have a military and a navy who do not work together and are actively competing. So we have allies, but the allies are not great.
Yeah. We are definitely going to revisit this one. And by the way, I have to tell you, in all honesty, when I saw the suggestion of the topics, like, I already did that. We already did that with Hoover Harbor, but that was just me. I didn't have the full creative juices of this team to really blow this up into something more than just blowing up a dam. So thanks to the suggestion on the topic there. We'll circle back around. This has been fun. I know a lot of the members of our cast have to head off to do other things. And so, Eric, good luck tonight with everything you're doing there and the kiddos. And I just want to say once again how much fun this has been for us. I enjoyed the stuff before we recorded and enjoying the stuff here. So we're going to head and close out the actual episode, just reminding our listeners, visit our website. If you weren't part of the live stream, so you're hearing this as part of the podcast release, you can go to our YouTube channel and and check out the live stream there, because it'll be archived there and you can see the fun that ensued before or after, if you want to call it fun. We had fun, we thought, that's going on there. But this is what we do. You got a glimpse to a little bit behind what goes on with before an episode, during an episode, and all the other fun stuff. And I think you can enjoy why we enjoy each other by seeing what went on here today, so as much as anything. So on behalf of the team, all of us, I just want to say thank you to our listeners. We appreciate you. We're glad we've made it to 200 episodes. We're an outlier among podcasts. I'm amazed at the number of podcasts that don't make it past like their 10th episode. So sometimes it's easy to criticize myself for our inconsistency sometimes at release schedule, but we are way out there on the right-hand side of what's going on in terms of what's there. And that's not just because of my efforts or Alexis's efforts, but now the team efforts as well. So Alexis, you're with us now, so I'm going to let you close us out. Do we have any suggestions for our fork in time listeners if they happen upon a fork in time?
Connor thinks you should take it.
Connor thinks you should take it, so you definitely should. Okay, I just stopped the recording on the episode proper. For our live stream listeners, this has been a lot of fun for us. I need to go back now and read all the stuff that was going on in the chat because it's hard to do what we were doing and keep track there. This is multitasking. This is way too much multitasking for my feeble brain and only having 3 screens active with everything that's going on here.
If you could print the chat, I'd almost like to read through that thing because I saw several little threads in there that would be fun to pull on when we come back in.
I think that we can. I'll have to look to see what gets captured in the YouTube part of this when it's there.
Yeah,
but it'll definitely be there to go back to and glance through it again. And again, on behalf of the Fork in Time team, thank you for getting up early, staying up late, whatever it is you did around the world to be part of it here. We appreciate you having that chance to be with us and join us here. We will do it again. And we look forward to that. And so on behalf of the Fork in Time team, we're going to end the stream here. And we're going to say good morning, good night, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. Thanks.